After his wife collapsed at work, her husband chose his mistress's party over her, completely unaware she owns the company, finalizing his $600 million deal. A decision that will soon shock him in ways he never imagined. Inside the private executive wing she secretly built, Evelyn Hart, the convoy CEO the world respects, but her husband ignores, lay weak on the floor while frantic staff rush to help. But miles away, her husband Daniel stepped out of his car laughing, bouquet in hand, ready to celebrate his mistress's birthday, bragging about a $600 million contract he believed his hard work earned. Everyone at the office whispered Evelyn's name with reverence. But Daniel whispered hers with irritation, seeing her only as a burden, never realizing she was the unseen force controlling his future. As Evelyn opened her eyes in the ambulance, one thought sliced through her like cold steel. He didn't come. He chose her again, and he had no idea the woman he abandoned was the very one about to sign or destroy his $600 million fortune. But what will Evelyn do now that she knows the truth? What happens when a collapsing wife rises as the CEO her husband never respected? And how will Daniel react when he discovers the company owner he desperately needs is the wife he left on the floor? Before dawn broke, the house was already warm with the quiet glow of the kitchen lights. Evelyn moved slowly, her shoulders slightly hunched, her steps dragging with exhaustion she tried to hide. She whisked eggs with trembling fingers, pausing twice when her vision blurred. She hadn't slept. Not well, not in months. But still, she woke early to make breakfast the same way she always had, out of habit, out of love, and maybe out of fear. Fear that if she stopped doing these little things, she would disappear entirely in her own home. Upstairs, the muffled glow of a phone screen lit Daniel's side of the bed. He wasn't asleep. He was awake, scrolling, laughing under his breath. The faint clicks of his phone camera sounded, selfies angled just right. Messages chimed after every picture. The same woman, the mistress, Leah. When Evelyn called up softly, "Breakfast is ready," Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he muttered just loud enough for himself, "Always bothering me so early. No wonder everyone says she's too much." He didn't realize someone else heard it. At the bedroom door, their 15-year-old daughter, Mara, stood still, her heart sinking deeper. Every morning, she watched her father roll over and toss his phone aside with annoyance before dragging himself up. She saw how her mother brightened at his footsteps, wiping her hands on her apron, trying to smile despite the dark circles under her eyes. Daniel took one look at the breakfast table, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, toasted bread, bacon, and scoffed. "That's it. You know I need protein. No wonder I'm always tired," he said as he scrolled his phone again. Evelyn's hands tightened around the plate she held, but she said nothing. She never said anything. Mara's jaw tightened. She said nothing, too. But the look she gave her father was one she never would have dared give a year ago. When Daniel walked out the door, he didn't say goodbye, but the mistress texted him, "Can't wait for tonight." He smiled at that openly, right in front of them. Evelyn's shoulders fell once he was gone. Mara stepped to her side, pretending to grab her backpack, but she placed one hand gently on her mother's back. "You okay?" she whispered. Evelyn forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart." She wasn't. At work, her exhaustion hit her like a crashing wave. She pushed through meetings, reviewed contracts, corrected reports, and avoided sitting down too long because she knew if she did, she might fall asleep. Every time a junior staff member addressed her as Mrs. Hart, she nodded politely, hiding the truth that she was far more than they knew. The actual owner operating behind layers of executive structure. The weight of secrecy pressed on her chest, but the weight of her collapsing marriage pressed harder. That afternoon, as she was reviewing the final draft of the monumental $600 million deal, one Daniel believed he had secured by himself, the room began spinning. Her fingers went numb. The printed pages slipped from her hand. Someone shouted her name. A cold wave washed over her. Then nothing. She hit the floor. Chaos erupted. She was rushed into an ambulance. An oxygen mask pressed to her face. Staff panicked, calling emergency contacts. They called her husband first. He didn't answer because at that exact moment, Daniel was stepping into a booming penthouse suite decorated with gold balloons, a towering cake, and a laughing crowd. His mistress threw her arms around him, kissing him loudly as cameras flashed. "Let's pop the champagne," Leah squealed, and Daniel obliged, spraying the room as his phone buzzed repeatedly calls from the hospital emergency line. He swiped them away. He lifted Leah into his arms, posting photos instantly, her legs wrapped around him, champagne dripping down his jacket, her birthday sash glittering. The photos spread online within minutes. Mara saw them. She had been calling her mother for hours. No answer. Panic grew in her chest like a fist tightening around her ribs. Then, an alert. Her father tagged in a party post, holding another woman, kissing her, drunk, laughing. Her blood ran cold. Before she could even process it, her phone rang. A voice trembling on the other side said, "Is this Mara Hart? This is a hospital. Your mother has collapsed." The world beneath her shook. By the time Evelyn opened her eyes in the hospital room, she saw not her husband, but her co-worker Thomas sitting anxiously by her side. He looked relieved, but his face was tight with anger, too. "He didn't come," Thomas said gently. "We called him several times. He never responded." Evelyn's lips trembled. Her heart cracked. She closed her eyes as tears slipped down her temples. This was the moment something inside her began to shift. Pain turning into something sharper, something colder, something waking up. Morning light filtered weakly into the hospital room, turning the pale walls soft gold. Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Her body felt fragile, but her mind was strangely clear, like a storm had finally passed and left only cold, sharper behind. The door swung open with a careless push. Daniel walked in. No rush, no fear, no apology. He smelled faintly of champagne. "You're awake," he said, sounding almost annoyed. "Good. They said you were overreacting as usual." Evelyn blinked. "Overreacting?" Daniel shrugged, checking his phone. "I mean collapsing. People collapse all the time. Honestly, Evelyn, you have to stop being so needy. Do you know how embarrassing it was to get all these missed calls? People thought I was avoiding something." He didn't realize she already knew the truth. She turned her head away from him, quiet. Her silence unsettled him, but he hit it with a scoff. "Anyway," he added, "try not to make things dramatic next time. I have a lot going on." Mara entered at that moment, her face pale and swollen from crying. She stopped when she saw her father sitting casually in the corner, legs crossed, scrolling his phone as if he were waiting for his food at a cafe. The air shifted. Not even Daniel could pretend not to feel the tension pulsing from his daughter. "Mara," Evelyn whispered, reaching out. Mara went straight to her, hugging her tightly, her small shoulders shaking. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her daughter, feeling how deeply this had wounded her. Daniel cleared his throat. "All right, stop acting like someone died." Mara's head whipped toward him, eyes blazing with a fury he didn't expect. But she said nothing. She held her mother tighter. A nurse entered and awkwardly checked Evelyn's vitals, clearly sensing something off. When she left, the room fell into thick silence. Daniel finally stood. "Well, if you're fine, I'll head out. I have a meeting later. Big things happening. You know, actual important stuff." Evelyn's breath caught at the irony. Important. He had no idea. He walked out without touching her, without apologizing, without looking at her again. When the door clicked shut, Evelyn felt something inside her crack. Not like shattering glass, but like stones splitting under pressure. Quiet, controlled, final. Later that afternoon, she was discharged with strict instructions to rest, hydrate, and avoid stress. Instructions that were impossible to follow in a home ruled by emotional warfare. As she walked through her front door, her hands trembled. Mara hovered around her protectively, but the moment Evelyn stepped into the living room, she froze. On the TV, on the laptop, on Daniel's tablet, photos of the party were everywhere. Leia sitting on Daniel's lap. Leia showing off a necklace. Leia kissing his cheek. Champagne pouring. Laughter exploding. Daniel's caption, "Best night of my life." Her heart constricted painfully. Mara rushed to close the screens, but the images were etched into Evelyn's mind now. Hours later, neighbors began whispering on their porches. Evelyn could hear them through the window as she tried to rest on the couch. "Did you see the photos? With another woman, bold as daylight. Poor Evelyn. She doesn't even know. He doesn't deserve her." She pressed her hand to her forehead, feeling a wave of dizziness, equal parts humiliation and heartbreak. That night, when she thought the house was quiet, Mara stepped silently past her parents' room. She heard voices. Daniel on the phone. Leia's voice was audible on speaker. "When I get pregnant, you'll finally divorce her, right?" Daniel laughed softly. "Of course. I'm just waiting for you to give me the real family I deserve. Evelyn's useless now. Dead weight." Mara gasped silently, her hand flying to her mouth. She tiptoed back to her room, shut the door, and burst into silent tears. But then she grabbed her phone. Something told her she might need proof. Her mother might need proof. She pressed record. The next day, Evelyn ventured out to the cafe near her office for a quiet moment of peace. She ordered tea, but her hands shook too much to drink it. As she sat there, Eyes closed, she heard a familiar voice 2 tables behind her. Leah, loud, brash, oblivious. Once I get pregnant, I'll be the real wife. Daniel says Evelyn is basically done. She's sick, weak, always complaining. He wants someone who actually excites him. Laughter. Evelyn's heart stopped mid-beat. Her chest tightened. Her footing in reality shifted. Anger, humiliation, heartbreak, all colliding at once. But then clarity, cold, razor-sharp, steady. She stood up, walked out, and her tears didn't fall until she reached her car. And even then, they weren't cries of heartbreak anymore. They were cries of awakening. That very night, she opened her laptop. She pulled up bank transfers, emails, receipts, expenses she never authorized, messages between Daniel and Leah, company misconduct logs, stolen funds, all of it. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from purpose. Across the hall, unbeknownst to her, Mara was doing the same, saving screenshots, audio recordings, posts, timelines. Both mother and daughter building separate mountains of truth, neither aware the other was doing the same. The next day at work, her boss, Mr. Lennox, the only one who knew she owned everything behind the scenes, approached her gently. "You look exhausted," he said. He glanced at the hospital bracelet still on her wrist. "Is everything okay?" Daniel stumbled in moments later, loud and dismissive, berating Evelyn for making him look bad. Mr. Lennox's eyes widened. He had never heard Daniel speak to the CEO like this. He pulled Evelyn aside afterward. "You don't have to tolerate that," he said quietly. "You're stronger than this." Those words planted themselves deep inside her. That evening, during a family gathering, Daniel snapped in front of everyone, uncles, aunts, cousins. He jabbed a finger at her and said loudly, "You're dead weight, Evelyn. A burden, always collapsing, always ruining things. I should have left you a long time ago." People gasped. Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply stared at him with a newfound stillness. He mistook her silence for surrender. But that silence was strategy, preparation, resolve. A storm was forming, and she was at its center. Daniel spent the next week oblivious to the quiet shift inside his wife. He strutted around the house like a man invincible, humming while dressing for work, whistling while texting Leah, even pausing in the hallway mirror to straighten his tie with a smile that made Mara want to shatter the glass. Evelyn stopped reacting. She no longer flinched when he criticized her cooking, no longer apologized when he accused her of acting sensitive, no longer tried to explain when he scolded her for being tired or quiet. She simply watched him. And Daniel, arrogant, careless, blind, mistook that stillness for defeat. One evening, as he stood before the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks, he said casually, "Leah might be pregnant. If she is, things will change. A man deserves an heir, a healthy one." Evelyn's hand paused mid-fold of a towel. Mara, passing by the hallway, froze. Daniel didn't even look at them as he continued. "Wouldn't blame you for being jealous. Youth wins." He left the room, smirking at his reflection, completely unaware that Evelyn's palms were steady, not shaking, that her heart rate didn't spike, that her quiet wasn't fear. Across the hall, Mara's eyes were red. She closed her bedroom door and pressed her back to it, breathing through another silent cry. But then she opened her drawer, took out her phone, and imported the recordings into a hidden folder marked for Mom. Something told her they would need it. The next morning, Evelyn left for work early. When she stepped into her office, her assistant froze. "Mrs. Hart, are you all right?" Evelyn nodded, her face composed, her movements graceful but unervingly cold. She walked past her assistant and entered her private office, shutting the door behind her. For a moment, she stood still, staring at her reflection in the glass. Dark hair pinned back, pale face framed with quiet intelligence, eyes that no longer shimmered with sadness. They shimmered with clarity. She sat and continued gathering what she needed. The bank transfers, showing Daniel funneling money into an account under Leah's name. The invoices for jewelry and luxury items bought with joint funds. The emails, where Daniel discussed stretching numbers to secure the $600 million deal. The receipts for hotel stays. Copies of workplace misconduct complaints Daniel thought had been deleted. Screenshots from Leah's social media, deleted soon after, but not soon enough. Her folder grew thicker, heavier, more damning with every passing hour. That afternoon, Daniel barged into her office without knocking, something he did constantly, never understanding the weight of the room he was entering. "You need to pick up your energy," he snapped, ignoring her coworkers who stared from their desks. "Honestly, you're depressing to be around. I don't need that before my big deal meeting." Mr. Lennox witnessed the entire interaction. For the first time, Evelyn lifted her eyes to Daniel's. Her expression was unreadable, too calm. Daniel scoffed and walked out without noticing how many people watched him leave with silent judgment. Later that evening, Evelyn and Mara returned home to a quiet house. Daniel was out again, working late, though they both knew what that meant. The air was too still, too heavy. Evelyn walked to the bedroom and sat down, hands clasped neatly in her lap. Mara approached her slowly. "Mom, can I tell you something?" Evelyn looked up, but before Mara could speak, a notification buzzed loudly from Evelyn's phone. A message from her sister. "Have you seen this?" Attached were photos of Leia posing with gift boxes, necklaces, designer shoes, a ring, all bought with Evelyn's family's money, and Leia's caption, "When your man spoils you with everything, can't wait for our future." The comments were brutal. Some supportive, some mocking, all public. Rumors spread fast. Neighbors saw, coworkers saw, family saw. Humiliation wrapped itself around Evelyn's ribs like a tightening vine, squeezing until she could barely breathe. Then Mara stepped forward, hands shaking. "Mom, I heard something." She played the recording. Daniel calling Evelyn dead weight. Daniel telling Leia he would divorce her once Leia became pregnant. Daniel saying she was useless. Daniel laughing. Evelyn listened with no tears, just silence. A cold, motionless silence that frightened Mara more than any scream would have. When the recording ended, they sat together, both quiet. But for the first time, they were unified, not as mother and child in pain, but as two women waking up. Later that night, Evelyn stepped outside for fresh air and overheard neighbors gossiping again. "She's so quiet now, like a ghost. I hope she leaves him. Or maybe she can't. He's too powerful. She deserves better." Their words didn't hurt her. They strengthened her. A week later, Daniel walked into the kitchen with an arrogant grin. "Well," he announced proudly, "Leia might be pregnant. We're waiting for confirmation. If she is, I think we all know what that means." Evelyn simply nodded. A small nod that made Daniel frown. No tears, no arguing, no begging. He didn't know her nod meant she already knew something he didn't. Because that morning, Evelyn received a message from a private investigator she had quietly hired, a DNA test. Not Daniel's. Leia's previous partner's, the real father. Daniel was walking proudly into a disaster. But Evelyn simply said, "I see." He misread her calm as submission. He had no idea what was coming. The baby shower invitation arrived 3 days later. Gaudy, expensive, plastered with photos of Daniel and Leia. Most wives would have burned it, cried, or confronted him. Evelyn simply stared at it and smiled faintly. A smile Daniel didn't notice because he was too busy showing the invitation off, bragging that real love finally found him. That night, Evelyn quietly chose her outfit. A simple, elegant dress, dark, graceful, commanding, the kind worn by a woman who didn't come to beg, but to bring reckoning. She informed Mara they would be attending. Mara's eyes widened. "Why?" Evelyn touched her daughter's cheek. "Because the truth belongs in the light," she whispered. "And it's time." When the day arrived, the venue was extravagant, overflowing with flowers, balloons, and guests. Leia's name was everywhere. Daniel stood at the entrance, laughing loudly, bragging, basking in attention. But when Evelyn stepped through the doors, calm, composed, unshakable, the room fell into complete silence. Leia froze. Daniel's jaw dropped. Gasps echoed across the hall. Evelyn took one step forward, and the reckoning began. The music stuttered. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. Every eye pivoted toward the entrance as Evelyn Hart stepped into the lavish hall with her daughter at her side. She didn't rush. She didn't tremble. She walked with the measured confidence of a woman who'd already crossed her breaking point and left it behind. Her dark, elegant dress contrasted the bright pink decorations exploding across the room. It made her stand out, tall, calm, unshaken, an unsettling presence in the celebration that had been built on her humiliation. Daniel froze near the dessert table, his champagne flute slipping slightly in his grip. He hadn't expected her to come. He certainly hadn't expected her to look like this. Collected, poised, frighteningly silent. Leia's smile dropped like a stone. Her hand instinctively covered her belly, though even she didn't know for sure what grew inside it. "Evelyn," someone whispered. "Oh my God, why is she here?" This is about to get dramatic. Evelyn didn't acknowledge the murmurs. She walked straight toward the center of the room, forcing the crowd to part around her like a tide breaking around a stone. Daniel snapped out of his stupor and attempted a smile, a weak, twitching one. "Honey, this isn't the best place for you," he said loudly as though speaking to a child. "You're making a scene." Evelyn didn't blink. In fact, she didn't even look at him. She simply raised her phone, and connected it to the large screen behind the dessert table. With one tap, the screen lit up with call logs. 22 missed calls from the hospital, all ignored, all timestamped during the exact hours he was at Leia's birthday party. Gasps rippled through the room. Leia paled. Daniel swallowed hard. Evelyn, let's talk about this later. She tapped again. Photos filled the screen. Him at the party, holding Leia, pouring champagne, Leia kissing him, the selfie of him carrying her, grinning widely while his wife lay unconscious. The room exploded in whispers. Mara stepped forward and projected another set of images taken from her phone, screenshots of his affectionate texts to Leia, deleted posts, videos from the party, the one where he toasted to better things. Daniel lunged toward the screen as if he could stop the reveal, but Mara held up her hand with unexpected strength. Don't touch her, she said, voice trembling but powerful. The crowd murmured. Evelyn's voice, quiet, steady, finally filled the room. While I collapsed at work, while doctors fought to stabilize me, you popped champagne. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They sliced through the hall like cold steel. Daniel stepped closer, hands out. Evelyn, listen. She ignored him and tapped again. The next set of images were receipts, bank statements, transfers from their joint account to Leia, luxury items, jewelry, hotel stays. Leia gasped, covering her mouth as the crowd muttered angrily. Wow, she took money from the wife. Shameless. And he allowed it. Daniel's face drained of color, but Evelyn wasn't done. Her next tap played the recorded audio. His voice filled the hall. She's dead weight. She's useless. Once you get pregnant, I'll leave her. She can collapse for all I care. It was a death sentence in sound. People recoiled. A woman near the front covered her face in disgust. A man shook his head and muttered, monstrous. Daniel flinched like each word struck him physically. That audio, she's manipulating you all. But Evelyn lifted her gaze to him for the first time. You left me for dead, she said softly. And now you want me to pretend it didn't happen. Silence. Then Evelyn tapped one final time. The DNA test results filled the screen. Not his child. Never was. Not even close. Leia staggered backward. What? What is this? She screamed. This is fake. Daniel, tell them it's fake. But the room had already turned. People stepped away from her. Some shook their heads. Others whispered viciously. The illusion had shattered. Daniel's legs went weak. Evelyn, please. She stepped out of his reach. Your arrogance, she said, was always louder than the truth. And now that truth is here. Mara took her mother's hand. Daniel fell to his knees. I can fix this. Just don't leave. Please, Evelyn. I need you. Evelyn looked down at him with an expression empty of hate, empty of love, just clarity. You need me, she whispered. Where was that when I needed you? He tried to grab her hand, but she pulled it away with quiet dignity. The mistress fled the hall in tears as guests began filming, gossiping, condemning. Daniel shouted her name, tried to chase her, but no one moved aside for him anymore. His entire world collapsed in front of the people he wanted to impress most. He turned back to Evelyn, tears running down his face. Please help me. Don't do this. Evelyn took a slow breath. You chose your mistress over me, she said. You chose humiliation over loyalty. You chose selfishness over family. Now I choose myself. She turned, lifted her chin, and walked out of the hall with her daughter. People parted for her like royalty. Daniel remained on the floor, broken, begging, calling her name. But Evelyn didn't look back. Not once. The door closed behind them. And with that quiet click, she ended the chapter he thought she would never escape. The cold evening air felt strangely warm as Evelyn and Mara stepped outside the hall. The lights from the lavish venue spilled onto the pavement behind them, but Evelyn didn't look back. She inhaled slowly, feeling oxygen fill her lungs more fully than it had in months, maybe years. Each step she took away from that place felt like shedding another layer of pain, betrayal, and fear. Mara squeezed her mother's hand, her voice small but steady. Mom, are you okay? Evelyn looked at her daughter. The young woman who had quietly borne the storm, who had seen more than a child ever should, who had become her silent guardian. Evelyn cupped Mara's cheek gently. I'm more than okay, she whispered. I'm free. They reached the car and sat inside quietly for a moment. Mara rested her head on Evelyn's shoulder, tears slipping down her face. Not from sadness, but from relief. Inside the hall, chaos still echoed. Screams, arguments, people filming. Guests trying to escape the tension. Somewhere in that storm, Daniel was facing his long overdue reckoning. But out here, the night was calm. They drove home without a word, letting silence embrace them like a warm blanket. When they arrived, The house felt different. Not empty, open. The tension that had poisoned the walls for months seemed to evaporate. Evelyn walked into the bedroom she once shared with Daniel. She looked around the space slowly. The pillows she fluffed every morning, hoping he'd notice. The perfume she wore, hoping he'd compliment her. The dresser filled with gifts she never received because he bought everything for someone else. She sat on the bed and let out a quiet breath. Mara appeared in the doorway. "Mom, what happens now?" Evelyn lifted her gaze. For the first time in a long time, she smiled, soft, confident, unbroken. "What happens now," she said, "is the beginning." The next morning, Evelyn woke before dawn, not to cook, not to serve, not to beg for attention, but simply because she wanted to watch the sunrise. She brewed coffee and sat by the window, feeling peace settle over her. Daniel had texted her 26 times. Apologies, excuses, promises, pleas, threats, voice notes. She didn't open a single one. By 8:00 a.m., she arrived at the company headquarters. Staff members whispered as she walked through the lobby. They had seen the videos, the photos, the scene. Most didn't know she owned the entire company, but that would change today. Mr. Lennox greeted her outside her private suite. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Evelyn nodded. Completely. A mandatory company-wide meeting had been scheduled. Hundreds of employees gathered in the main auditorium. The lights dimmed slightly as Evelyn stepped onto the stage. Gasps filled the room. Some employees knew her as a high-ranking executive. Others only recognized her from the viral clips, but none had known the truth until now. She walked to the podium and placed her hands on the sides, steady, strong, composed. 4 years, she began, I allowed my personal life to overshadow my worth. I allowed disrespect to chip at my confidence. I allowed quiet suffering to become routine. The room was silent. But today I choose something else. She tapped a button. The screen behind her lit up with documents, ownership papers, company founding records, her signature, her name. Gasps erupted. "I am the owner and founder of Heartline Corporation," she continued, "and I will no longer hide behind the scenes to protect someone who never protected me." Employees broke into applause. Some stood, some wiped tears. Mr. Lennox watched her with pride. Evelyn let the applause continue for a moment before she lifted her hand to quiet them. As for Daniel Hart, she said calmly, effective immediately, he has been removed from all involvement in the $600 million deal and all future negotiations. People exchanged stunned looks, and she added, due to personal misconduct, financial fraud, and breach of company ethics, he is permanently banned from the organization. The room burst into shocked murmurs. Some clapped, some shook their heads in disbelief, but no one objected. Evelyn stepped away from the podium, leaving the crowd buzzing behind her. As she walked back to her office, her assistant approached her with widened eyes. "Ma'am, he's downstairs." Evelyn didn't have to ask who. "Daniel." He burst out of the elevator just in time to catch up with her. His eyes were red, his suit wrinkled, his hair disheveled, the collapse of a man who once thought he couldn't fall. "Evelyn, please," he begged, falling into step behind her. "We can fix this. I made mistakes, but—" She held up her hand. "There is nothing to fix, Daniel." He choked out a laugh. "So that's it. After everything, after all these years." She looked at him one last time. "You ended this long before I did." He grabbed her arm desperately. "Evelyn, I love you." "You love the version of me who served you," she said quietly, "not the woman who stood up to you." He froze. The truth hit him harder than any evidence she showed the world. She turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the polished hallway, knees buckling, breath shaking, future shattered. Evelyn walked into her office, closed the door softly behind her, and exhaled. Mara entered seconds later, having been waiting outside. "Mom," she whispered. Evelyn smiled, opening her arms. Mara rushed into them. "I'm proud of you," Mara cried softly. Evelyn stroked her daughter's hair. "I'm proud of us." They pulled back, both wiping tears. Except now the tears were cleansing, not breaking. Evelyn looked out the window at the skyline she built, the company she created, the life she was reclaiming. Her voice was calm, sure, full of promise. "It's time," she said, "to write a new story." And with her daughter by her side, she stepped into the future, leaving behind the man who underestimated her and walking toward a life she finally chose for herself, a life of power, peace, and freedom.